All right. Hey guys. Hey everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here at this time. I really appreciate you being present with me in this space, and I'm excited to bring forth more information. More knowledge, more wisdom from my experience, and things that I feel are interesting and helpful. And today's subject, I think, is interesting, and it's something I've been exploring and kind of realizing the power of, and hopefully you have also experienced this, or if you haven't, maybe now is the opportunity to realize of the power within. So today's topic and the subject, the title of the video, is thinking at the speed of light. Sounds crazy. It sounds like, what do you mean? But hear me out, right? Light is what you are, right? You are composed of light. It is the essence of your being. It is just pure light. Just like the sun and the stars shining in the heavens. That same light is within you, the human, right? Now science will tell you that light is the fastest moving thing in the universe. Nothing travels faster than the speed of light, right? Now, spirituality is, again, it's the middle ground between religion and science, because religion is a belief system about the higher powers and God and the spiritual realm. Science is based purely in the objective realm, dealing with the senses, dealing with what we see, right? Spirituality is the middle way between these two. So, I maintain and I posit that there is something in the universe that travels faster than the speed of light. And that is thought, right? Listen, right? Or just stop for a second. So, in my mind, I just said, "Hi, my name is James." To myself. I thought that. It appeared instantly in my mind. There is no lag time for that thought to reach me, right? Why does this matter? What is this like? Why does it matter, right? Well, because if you are composed of light, and you are, and the light in you desires to shine, it desires to radiate, to reach, right? There is only one thing that can stop it. There is only one thing that can block God's light within you, right? And it's thought, self-consciousness, right? Mind, ego, right? It's the only thing stopping your light from shining. Now, when you become the master of your mind, right? Because mind is all sense impulse, right? It's all, and it again, we talk about desire, and it's fueled by desire. The mind just wants things. Gimme, 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 right? When you discipline yourself, through meditation, through fasting, through prayer, cultivating your thoughts rather than just letting them, run wild, you begin to do what Jesus did when he said, "Get behind me, Satan," right? Because that's what it is. Satan is the thought. That one little thing, that one little pinprick that is blocking God's infinite light from shining and emanating, you say, get behind me, and you start being guided by a higher power, by a deeper well of energy and power and knowledge that is coming from your heart center rather than your periphery consciousness, your mind, your sense impulse. Okay? So, thinking at the speed of light is how you become the creator. It's how you manifest, right? Instantly, from within. Because now, right, when you've gotten rid of that old self, that old self-consciousness, those doubts, those worries, those fears, those shames, the guilt, right? When you see that for what it is, as not you, it's not who you really are. That's the whole trick. That is Satan's game, right? That's why he's evil. That's why he's a fallen angel. Because he wants you to believe in a lie, right? He wants you to believe in a lie. So, absolutely, this is spiritual warfare. It's been very misunderstood by dualistic thinking, right? Because, it's not about duality at all. In fact, you collapse that, right? Because now you're thinking in God's mind. Your mind and God's are now unified. This is what I believe that Jesus was really teaching, right? How to become a son of God or a daughter of God, right? Of course, the foundations of the church, purely patriarchal, left a lot of shit out, and it ended up becoming Christianity, although I do identify as a Christian, became more of a moral doctrine than a spiritual path. And those moral doctrines, again, they function on a judgment, on this is good and this is evil. Whereas, if you go back to the Old Testament, that's why it says, God says, don't do that. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't judge, because then ye shall surely die. This is why death exists. Because we are truly immortal spirits. We cannot die. We go on and we exist forever in eternity, infinitely. That's our light, shining. Right? It will continue to shine beyond the prison of the mortal flesh, of the mortal thought. So, again, it does come back to self-discipline. That if you are to be unified with the mind of God, with Christ, you have to make the desires of your ego, of your limited self, right, the small you, subservient to the big you, the bigger picture, right? The real you, which is love and light and joy and peace. That's God's gift. That's His grace. And I hesitate to say His, actually, right? People do get lost in that, I think. God the Father, the Father, the Father, right? But really, as Jesus said, grounded in the earthly mother, ascending to the heavenly Father, right? So it's about fully embracing your humanness, being a human, fully human, and that takes work, that's not an easy, it's not always easy, right? When you've got things that you inherit from your past, from the story, from the linear mind, right? Because again, when you're thinking in alignment, with the universe, your thoughts are not linear. It's, you see the full circle, you see the full picture, the full image, So it is that obstacle to be overcome. It's self-consciousness, worry, fear, and doubt. They actually don't belong. It's actually not you. But when you start associating those things as a part of, as you become tricked. That's why it's the matrix. It's a bag of tricks to get you to be confused, to be lost, in the mind, right? And when you step out of that, back into yourself, back into the kingdom, you see that it is a game that we've been played, by liars for so long. And most people have been around long enough are fed up, with the lies, And truth is something totally different, because it comes from your heart. You have to develop an anchor in a reservoir of trust inside of yourself, in your heart, right? And when you do that, again, the mind becomes subservient, and your thoughts and God's thoughts are one and the same. This is why they say that men in their wickedness, they incur the anger or the enmity of God, because we create this separation, right, between us and the universe, between us and the divine, But it's not God getting angry. God doesn't get angry, Perfection can't be, that's a human emotion. Our anger is a result of separation from divinity, and a sense of powerlessness and helplessness and despair. That's where it comes from. But again, the opportunity to step into growth and to leaving the past behind is the opportunity to leave those emotions and those energies behind, where they belong, in history, in his story, which is the linear mind. But, that's not how it works. The mind doesn't function linearly. It is cyclical, cycles, so that's the ability, to see the full picture, to see the kingdom, to see heaven, to see the world as Jesus saw it, and to feel it as he felt it, And if you've done that, if you feel it, it's, this is a war, because of the imbalance, right? Because of the war between, spirit and matter, right? But there is an anchor and there's a balance point, you know, like a medium, you know, within your heart, like a safe space where that war, that conflict, that tension, that enmity, and that rage, right? That battle that is the norm for our world and our society today because of the lack of self-discipline and control and understanding, that there's a space where that doesn't exist, actually, you know? Because what you've done is you're actually basically out-vibrating it, you know? It is a competition, you know, competition is in everything, you know? And you have to compete for your soul. You have to fight, you know? But it's not an external battle. It's you're fighting the old self, you know? The depression, the stagnation, the lies, you know? Everything that is not in service to the divine, to the higher will, to the big picture, you know, to the universe, you know. That's what you're leaving behind, you know. And the bitterness, right, of defeat, you know. Because, you know, love triumphs, right? It always does. And people who are at enmity or at odds with that are in defeat. They've already lost, you know, and they know it, right? And they're bitter about it, right? This is why when you do rise in the light, right, the darkness, it's like it wants to get a hold of you even more now, you know. It's an intensity of the battle, you know. When you master the internal world, right? Because then you can have a better influence and a better impact on the external, you know. But it starts within first, and that's self-mastery. That's discipline. That's thinking at the speed of light, meaning not allowing anything to block, prevent, dim your light. Because again, that is what you are. That's the real you, you know. But we've been inundated by lies, by misinformation, by misinterpretation, you know. So reclaim your mind, reclaim your heart, reclaim your body, reclaim your peace. And then you will know what it's like to think at the speed of light. So I hope this was helpful, or at least thought-provoking or inspiring or challenging maybe in some way,